If you had to rank the most WTF moments from this past weekend, what would make your top three and what order?
Oh, well, I know what 1 and 2 are, no question. So if we're working backwards, number three's tough. There's two that are right there for me. Okay, since I'm wearing the Patrick Mahomes jersey here, I'm gonna go number three. Kansas City outgaining the Texans by 300 yards of offense and still almost losing in overtime to Houston. It took overtime and a last-second field goal to beat Houston. So over 300 yards of offense more than the Texans in beating them. Number two, I was working the game on radio. Number two, Patriots-Raiders. Literally have never seen anything like that before. And then number one is the 33-point comeback. The 33-point comeback is the most enjoyable football game I've had all season. It's either that or the Vikings-Bills game. Like, it's just the most enjoyable experience I've had watching football all year. Was watching Kirk Cousins go down by 33 and just laughing in the face of the Vikings, to then having the complete 180 of rooting for them to come back in that game and them succeeding.
Okay, I'll kind of match you to some certain respects here, but also mention some honorable mentions as well. Justin Herbert and his comeback against the Tennessee Titans. I think it was like 40 seconds left on the clock. A great comeback drive there. But I would probably put in my top three the end of the Cowboy Jaguars game, because the Cowboys were in cruise control for a good chunk of that game. And then Trevor Lawrence lived up to his number one overall draft prospect status and looked amazing in that second half of that game, guiding the Jaguars to an overtime victory. Even though the defense came up with the big play, the what the fuck moment there would probably be Noah Brown. How do you not catch that? And I felt bad about Noah Brown being the scapegoat in that game, mostly because he was having a good game for the Cowboys. He had a couple touchdowns for them, came up big for Dak on multiple occasions, but came up so small when the ball hit him in the chest. My other honorable mention, you mentioned the Chiefs and Texans game. It's just a what the fuck just in general for me that the 1-win Texans were even in that spot against Kansas City. Now, not that I'm complaining from a fantasy football perspective. I needed every bit of overtime Travis Kelce that I got. So I'm thankful for that. But I was left in shock that was even the case, especially when you talk about where the Texans are. They're splitting time between Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll at quarterback. Shout out to Yahoo for giving Jeff Driscoll tight end status. You use him occasionally, but I don't know. Either way, that kind of tells you where they are. Damian Pierce placed on IR this past week. The Texans don't really have anything, which I guess that could be just preparing your team to play a bad team. Sometimes human nature, we kind of overlook places like that.
I will say, to the point about the Texans, one of my favorite things about watching the Texans play is which random players from other teams are on the Texans, because they keep getting number one waiver priority. So I tune into the Texans. I'm like, Philip Dorsett plays on the Texans. OJ Howard plays on the Texans. Amari Rogers is a Texan now. I didn't even know he got cut by the Packers. Apparently he's on the Texans now. Eno Benjamin is on the Texans now. That is one fun thing about watching a Texans game.
But the 33-point comeback, I tuned on maybe in the second quarter, right? Because I had picked up Minnesota's defense just because I thought the Colts offense is just so bad that Minnesota's defense should be fine. They should be a great start. They should be one of those streaming options that, they're not a great defense, but given how bad the offense they're playing, they give you 8 to 10 points. And by the way, they did get robbed of a couple defensive touchdowns too. So I will add that to the math of feeling like I kind of got a little bit of the chingas there. But moving on, they allow the 33 unanswered out the gate. Not all of it's on the defense itself. There's also some bad offense there that led to bad defense. But the 33-point advantage, just mathematically, by the numbers, I've seen all these different Twitter accounts come up with a by the numbers stat line for it to break it down. It's 99.999999999, sounding like you're coming out of Germany, the amount of nines you're saying there.
I'm moving away from the microphone on that one, but I will say, if you were to take the 3 games this year, so the probabilities at the best chances for the winning team, so we're talking about week 3, Minnesota versus Detroit, week whatever that was, Buffalo versus Minnesota, and last week's Colts versus Minnesota game. If you're taking the best chance for each of those 3 teams to win, do you know what the probabilities are that the Minnesota Vikings win all 3 of those games, that they go 3-0, which they did? The odds are, what
I would
is
say
your guess?
like winning the lottery?
1 in 28,374. That is the chances of the Minnesota Vikings winning all 3 of those games to now be 11-3. It's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, for the Colts game, they should have won by so many more. They had 2 scoop and score touchdowns taken off the board.
Yeah.
The Vikings should have won that game so easily because it's the perfect formula for how this type of upset is possible, which is a team that's terrible and fired their coach already, like has given up on the season, that gets out to against a team that scores a lot of points and gives up a lot of points. And that team that is bad gets their points on some bullshit, which is a punt block for touchdown and a pick 6 right before half. Like, that's how the formula works for a team to get a 33-point lead and then to give back the 33-point lead. And if you were to pick a quarterback who would represent the greatest comeback in NFL history, Patrick Mahomes might be good, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, but after like the best of the best quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins is a pretty good pick to have the greatest comeback ever.
I thought you were going the other route because the Matt Ryan slander is spicy on Twitter right now. And I don't know how you even could defend the guy anymore. Like, I loved watching Matt Ryan growing up. He was like one of my favorite quarterbacks. I rooted for him in the 2016 season because I was all in on that year's version of the Falcons. And then the Super Bowl happened. But aside from the Super Bowl, which we all remember, iconic, 28-3, we all remember it. He also has the record for largest lead blown in an NFC championship game. And now this loss to Minnesota is the largest comeback victory in NFL history. He has 3 record-breaking comeback losses to his name. That's the record setter, but the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, those will never die.
Added to the fact that in the I looked this up actually after week 1. In the 5 seasons post 28-3, the Atlanta Falcons blew 16 fourth quarter leads. 16 fourth quarter leads. Now, some of them were small leads. Some of them were that game that Todd Gurley scored a touchdown by mistake and then lost to the Lions. Like, there have been some bad ones in there, but I guess the meager defense I can give is like, this one wasn't really Matt Ryan's fault in terms of like, I could name like 4 people whose fault it was before Matt Ryan, but like this one, it's still just
common denominator, right? I know he's not playing cornerback for them. He's not out there in the secondary, but I feel like I can only write off so much of the defense when you're going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. He didn't turn the ball over in this one, but you kept giving Minnesota good field position by your inability to move the ball in the second half. I think they had 20 yards up until they had like one good drive in the second half, but for the most part, they had like 20 yards of offense throughout. That's what leads to a comeback loss. If your offense can't convert a third down or I can't just extend a drive pass.
But this one is like, at least it wasn't like the Super Bowl where you had an MVP level offense with one of these genius coaches who happens to be your offensive coordinator. Like, at least it wasn't that to that. It's like, our offense is shit and our offense has been shit all season. So at least it's like, that's a meager defense. And if you're Matt Ryan, remember back in week 6 when Frank Reich and Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard went out of their way to embarrass Matt Ryan when they said, hey, we know Matt Ryan's hurt, but we're benching him and we would have benched him even if he was healthy and he has no chance of getting his job back the rest of the season. Do you think? And then Frank Reich got fired 2 weeks later and then Jeff Saturday became the coach. And he's like, why would I play Sam Ehlinger when I have Matt Ryan? And if we had to go back to that point, do you think Matt Ryan would have wished that he had sat on the bench the whole season? Because like, yes, you would have still gotten paid. You would have been not playing football, but at least you wouldn't have the 33-point comeback loss on your reputation. I think if we had to go back, Matt Ryan might just say like, you know what, I'm good. I don't want this.
So at this point, if you're Matt Ryan, the only thing I think you can do is own it Like when he retires and people ask him about like how he was playing, if he's like one of those just kind of owns it, because I felt like there was a certain level of acceptance he already had for the Super Bowl loss. This is now going to be remembered forever. Do you open up like a sports bar named Comebacks or something like that?
So in the case of Matt Ryan, the thing I said is that Matt Ryan's career is over as far as my mind is concerned. Like everything this point forward is like Joe Flacco post Broncos, where it's like, oh yeah, he's still around, but like his career basically ended when he got traded to the Broncos. Like everything this point forward just doesn't exist in my mind for Matt Ryan.
I think for me, I thought there was still an outside shot of him making the Hall of Fame because, yes, he's a little bit of a compiler, similar to Philip Rivers. But when I add up, he has an MVP to his name. He's been to multiple NFC championship games. He was in a Super Bowl, had some Pro Bowl selections, pretty much all the Atlanta football records.
He will finish. He's going to finish with about as many passing yards as Dan Marino in his career.
Yeah, well, different standards, obviously, for those quarterbacks back then when he didn't throw the ball as much. Yes, he was going to have Hall of Fame numbers to add to his resume, but these 3 games, the 2 games, obviously, and yes, those games in themselves are already in the Hall of Fame. So he is in the Hall of Fame in a certain respect, just not for the right reasons. I almost feel like he, being part of this game, ruined his Hall of Fame case. And another fun tweet I saw too is the prior record for all-time comeback was with Frank Reich as the quarterback. Now the season that Frank Reich gets fired, his former team is the team that gives it up. Isn't that just world coming full circle?
It would have been only more perfect if he were still the coach. And to your point, Matt Ryan is Matt Ryan is a first ballot inductee in what I call the Hall of Very Good. He is in the Hall of Very Good. He's a first ballot inductee. Matthew Stafford will be an inductee in the Hall of Very Good. Dak Prescott will be inducted in the Hall of Very Good one day. Like that's kind of the purgatory that Matt Ryan exists in. He is very good. He is Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Very Good, but because of his last name, he'll get in the Hall of Fame. Like this is the territory that they occupy.
Not to get an Eli Manning thing, but not just because his last name. But it's hard to tell the story of football without Eli Manning. Matt Ryan.
But I don't do that for my Hall of Fame judgment. I don't say you gotta tell the story of football like that. Like whatever. You can put Joe Namath in the Hall of Fame if you want, but like that's doing a disservice to like.
Use it when it's convenient. When we debate in the baseball one, where we use that argument. So yeah.
No question. To pivot ever so slightly because I feel like we've run through the Colts Vikings. Yo, the end of the Raiders game. Oh my gosh, the end of the Raiders game.
Yeah.
Is going to live as an all-timer. And again, I was working that game on radio, so I got to hear it live. I was just like, oh my God, what is happening right now? And I didn't understand that when Chandler Jones is running, because I'm listening to it on radio, I can't see it until like 30 seconds later. I'm like, wait, so there's just nobody. They just lateraled it and there's nobody there. I'm like, what? No one's even going to stop him? He's going to go untouched into the end zone? I could not believe it when that was happening.
See, I was flipping channels. I was trying to keep track of a couple of fantasy matchups, and I only caught the back half. So I see the ball up in the air, but I don't know at what point that ball like entered the airspace, right? Where it was coming from. So I see Chandler Jones pushing Mac Jones to the ground and picking up the ball for the scoop and score. But I had no idea the context until replays came that it was Jakobi Meyers throwing it all the way across the field back to Mac Jones. And it's such a disservice to Mac Jones from this standpoint. What was he going to do? Even if you are going to do this crazy lateral thing, what did Jakobi Meyers, what did Belichick, what did Patricia hope that he was going to be able to do in that spot? We know Mac Jones isn't the greatest athlete. I'm not going to say he's completely inept as an athlete. I've seen him move before. But even in that situation, you want the ball more to be in the hands of your skill players, not your burly quarterback, you know?
No, and by the way, they called a draw play on a Hail Mary attempt, which by the way, in my mind made me think that This was very clearly Jakobi Meyers doing his own thing because all the offensive linemen wouldn't have been down the field if this was a design play to Mac Jones. This was when I think it was Stevenson, pitches it to him. That's kind of like a desperation, try and keep it alive. This was not a play where you're doing pitching laterals because they wouldn't have called a draw play if that was the call.
No,
they wouldn't have done that.
Even in that situation, play for overtime. I'm pretty sure, knowing Belichick, knowing how conservative a coach he is, they wanted to probably play for overtime because, the Raiders kind of swung momentum there at the end. But if you look at the second half of the game, it was all Patriots for the most part. I just don't see a situation in which they're like, we got to win this game in regulation and we're going to do it on laterals. I don't see that being in the design unless it was a hook and ladder thing. But again, Jakobi Meyers, why I think it's astute observation you saying he did his own thing, because I feel as though if you're going to do laterals, you usually have an outlet designed a little bit closer to you. Again, not all the way across the field past the original line to scrimmage.
Well, I don't even know if the first lateral was necessarily intended, because I think what they were hoping for is we can get it in the middle of the field and then maybe do a Miami Miracle situation. Like what's the play called? Statue of Liberty, where you get it in the middle and then you pitch it backwards to someone running the other direction. I think they wanted Meyers to kind of flip the field and maybe he could break something. Yeah. But maybe that's the design play. That's the best I could look for. It was not throw the ball to Mac Jones when 4 offensive linemen are at the 30-yard line and Mac Jones is at the 46 of the Raiders. Like, that was not the design at all.
That probably felt really good for Chandler Jones too, because Chandler Jones, an old
he was bawling, crying after the game. He was bawling, crying in the end zone after that happened.
He's obviously had an awful season his first year with the Raiders. But the former Patriot, anyone that remembers Chandler Jones as a Patriot knows that things didn't really end well. Bill Belichick in his classic move off a guy before they age out, got rid of Chandler Jones when he was about to get broken off. So I'm sure that felt really good for Jones in winning that game. Between that and the Miami Miracle, it's going to be tough to decide which one was a worse one for Bill. As the greatest of all time coach, you've been coaching for 50 plus years or whatever Bill Belichick's been doing. You obviously have a blooper reel. You obviously have a low light reel in your career. Those two, for newer fans, are competing for the 1 and 2 spots.
I mean, the helmet catch too, man. Like, those are the 3 most chaotic finishes.
But that one, well, I would say the miscue there is that the defensive linemen weren't able to sack Eli Manning. Then the cornerback not being able to dust it off. This one was just sheer boneheadedness. And then you go back to Miami Miracle, the boneheadedness was from Bill Belichick himself. Why are you putting Gronk out there to play safety? I think that's the very under talked about thing. That's why I think Miami Miracle might actually still be worse, because it was a deliberate move to have Rob Gronkowski out there as a safety, and knowing that he didn't have enough speed to catch Kenyon Drake running to the corner there.
But Roger Sherman brought up this point on Twitter, which is there have only been 2 lateral ending finishes in the history of the NFL. It's the Miami Miracle and it's this. These are the only 2. They both go against the Patriots. It's college football on steroids type of moment. And I just can't believe that that's how it ended, because, by the way, this comes after the drive right before. AJ Cole, who caught the game-tying touchdown with like a minute to play, pretty clearly was out of bounds.
Keelan Cole.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Keelan Cole. AJ Cole's the punter for the Raiders. Keelan Cole caught the ball with not 17 seconds, with like a minute to play, and was kind of pretty clearly out of bounds, but they just didn't call it. Like, so many things had to go wrong for the Patriots to lose that game, just as so many things had to go wrong for the Colts to lose that game against the Vikings. And by the way, so many things had to go wrong for the Cowboys to lose to the Jaguars. They were in cruise control of that football game, and so many things had to go wrong.
It's going to be a lot of fun charts, win prediction charts coming out of this weekend. And that's why week 15, the NFL 2022 is going to be an all-timer. Bookmark this in our video archive in terms of craziest weekends, and we'll see if it holds up over time. But anyway, guys, what was your ultimate what the fuck game moment or whatever from the weekend? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Reflect on the stupidity that was. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Juju and Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.